you created a conference around this topic, sharing stories, and we've talked about it already. It's called Stories Unveiled. I have yet to be invited to this all women's conference. I'll talk to you about that later. But will you tell our listeners about the conference? And starting a conference is not a small thing. So tell the story of why you started it, why it's so important to you.
Trevor, you're invited. Every
Let's
year
go.
men show up.
Let's
Every
go. And then they're
men
turned away at the door, but they show up for sure.
um, yeah, so let's see, in 2017, I my husband and I were kind of coming out of the hard stuff. Asher had joined a Seven Pillars group, and we were kind of wading through what healing, rebuilding, health looked like, what a healthy marriage looked like, and what trust looked like, and all of that. And so when we got to a certain point in that process, fully committed to our marriage, to each other, to healing and recovery, we decided that we didn't want this story and our junk to be wasted. I mean, what good is it if we deal with it in silence and we hold it close to our chest and we don't say a word about it, especially within the church, because we cannot possibly be the only people dealing with this. So he and I made a commitment to each other that where it applied and when it was relevant, we would just share our story, whether it was our marriage story, his story, because he's got his own story, or mine, and all that there. So we decided to do that, and as we started sharing our story, whether it was on a platform or individually in small groups, pure desire groups, stuff like that, I personally started having this, what I would call this holy discontent for all of the horrible stories that I heard, like just so many hard things. And it's one thing when it's your own life and you think, man, like this is terrible. But then it's like every single person I come in contact with has a story. And while that obviously to be true, it just became very real because the more I shared, the more people shared with me. And I didn't really know what I was asking for, but I just prayed and was like, God, I can't obviously fix this, and nor am I meant to. But what do I do with this? Because I was really, really concerned. I guess concerned's not the right word. I was bothered by the fact that I learned I learned some of the deepest, darkest things of some people's stories that I had known for years. And I didn't know any of these details. I had been in small groups with these people. Our kids did things together. Like we were good friends. And then the moment, I open up and share my story, it's kind of like the floodgates open with everybody else. And I'm like, how did I not know this? We've been friends for how long? And it just gave me this idea that we always pretend like we're okay. It's like, how are you? I'm good. I'm great. Things are fine. And especially in the church on a Sunday morning, and not that I was on staff. I was leading women's ministry locally at a church. And so it's not like when somebody asks me how I'm doing, if I had a terrible morning, I can't really just like, bleh, in the lobby because I'm working and all of that. But it's like we put on fronts and masks every day. And in church is sometimes the worst. Like church, I love church and I firmly believe you need to belong to a community, but sometimes that's the hardest place to remove your mask and just say like, this is it, like this is me, this is what's going on. And so I prayed about it and I was like, Lord, what do I do? How do I reconcile this in my head and in my heart? And in the beginning of 2018, the best I can explain it is he kind of just gave me this idea, this vision, I guess, for having an event that allowed women to share their stories. Why women? Because that's what I was working with, but I believe it's important for everybody. And so he gave me this platform because I was leading women's ministry at my church, and he gave me, a place, and he gave me the women, and it was just really clear, like, let women share their stories, give them a place to be able to glorify God through their broken pieces. And so that's what I did. I asked 5 or 6, I can't remember, of some of my closest friends and just said, will you share your story? Like, I know your story. Would you be willing to share it on a platform? And that was obviously scary for them. Most of them had never done it. I asked them to pray about it, and I just gave it to the Lord. And I was like, Lord, if this is going to be too scary for women, like, I understand that, but either give them the boldness and the courage or shut this whole vision thing down that you've given me. Like, you're just going to have to continue to open doors. And every single one of them said, yes, I want to do it. Like, this is amazing. And so I just asked our worship pastor to, if he could put together a band from local worship pastors in our valley, put together a worship team. I had a friend of a friend come in and give a message, because that is something that we do every conference. We don't just have stories, we also have a message to come in and give that. And really the heartbeat of it is these stories. And so that happened. We sold out. The church was packed the first year, and the Lord just said, keep doing it. So I did. So every year since 2018, I've held a conference, and it's just grown and been absolutely incredible. It's different stories every single year, different women, different walks, different seasons. And if there is a topic in the Bible that's addressed, we talk about it. I mean, there really is nothing that's off limits from this.
See, it sounds so fun. Nick, don't you want to go? I want to go.
Well, and Boise, Idaho is a great place to hang out. So I'd highly recommend that.
Yes.
As you share about that, Ashley, what just kept coming to mind is how many times, like when my wife and I have shared our story, or I hear from people in group that share a story, and how many times someone's response will be, thank you for sharing, because I thought I was the only one. I thought that was just me. And I think that's going back to what you said earlier, that for a lot of us, there's voices in our heads, and whether it's from our trauma and our past, or maybe there's even a word of the enemy there that's trying to hold us back or keep us down, that says you're alone, no one else can relate, it's just you. And so when we have, with God's prompting, the courage to be bold and tell part of our story, it is speaking to that part of someone's life that thinks they're alone. And when we realize we're not, and others are emboldened to tell their story, it's like, man, lives are changed, stuff happens, and we don't have to navigate, all the outcomes of it. That was one of the things I feel like God spoke to me very early in my recovery, was saying, Nick, if you'll be faithful to tell your story, I'll be faithful to use it. And it was helpful to me to think, okay, my role is to tell the story, and to tell it well, and wherever I can, whenever there's an opportunity, and not try to manage, well, how will people think? Are they going to walk away or want to know more? Or will they start groups? Just whatever could be the possible outcomes. Like, all that's in the Lord's hands. My role, tell my story, and then let the Holy Spirit take it from there. And I think if we have that mindset, beautiful things happen. And I know the conference is a place women, and maybe a few men like Trevor, can come and be encouraged to start taking that step, to not only hear other stories and go, oh, I'm not alone, but then realize how they could begin to craft and share their stories as well.